"This is our daughter. My mother would say, her voice always polished, always controlled. She works as a waitress. The word never sounded cruel when she said it." That was the worst part. It was soft, almost proud in tone, like she had rehearsed it enough times to believe it herself. But I knew better. I always knew what sat underneath it, a quiet dismissal, a carefully chosen version of me that made everyone comfortable. I would stand beside her, smiling politely, nodding when expected, shaking hands with people who barely looked at me twice after hearing it. Their expressions followed the same pattern every time: mild interest, followed by quick indifference. "Oh, that's nice." They'd say nice, not impressive, not ambitious, not worth asking more about, just nice. And my mother would move on, shifting the conversation back to my younger sister, Alina. "Now she's doing amazing things," she'd add, her face lighting up in a way it never did for me. Alina, with her effortless charm and carefully curated life, always knew how to fill a room. She laughed louder, spoke with confidence, and carried herself like someone who had never been doubted a day in her life. Because she hadn't. I used to wonder what that felt like. It wasn't always like this, or maybe it was, and I just hadn't noticed when I was younger. There were moments, small ones, that should have meant something, like the day I came home with the highest grades in my class. I remember standing in the kitchen, report card clutched tightly in my hands, waiting for my father to look up from his phone. "I did it," I said, unable to hide the excitement in my voice. "Top of the class." He glanced at the paper briefly, nodded once, and said, "That's good. Just don't get distracted." That was it. No smile, no celebration. No, "I'm proud of you." Later that same week, Elena won a small school art competition. My parents took her out to dinner, posted pictures online, and told every relative they could reach. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need that kind of validation. But something in me shifted that day quietly, permanently. By the time I was in my early 20s, I understood the unspoken rules of our family. Elena was the future. I was the backup plan, or maybe not even that. When I decided to move out at 23, my mother cried not because she would miss me, but because, in her words, "You're not ready for the real world." "I'll figure it out," I said. My father shook his head. "You always think you know better." So I left anyway. I found a small apartment, took the first job I could get, which happened to be waiting tables, and started building my life from scratch. It was hard, exhausting even, long hours on my feet, forced smiles for strangers, counting tips at the end of every shift just to make sure I could cover rent. But it was mine, every struggle, every small victory. It belonged to me, and yet somehow my parents never saw past that first job. To them, I never moved forward. I never grew. I stayed exactly where they were comfortable keeping me. Even years later, nothing changed. At family gatherings, my role remained the same, the waitress, the quiet one. The afterthought, I remember one particular evening at a distant cousin's engagement party. The room was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. My parents stood near the center, surrounded by relatives. I had just arrived when my mother spotted me. "There she is," she said, waving me over. I walked toward them, already knowing what was coming. "This is our daughter," she began, smiling at the group. "She works as a waitress." I felt the familiar pause, the subtle shift in attention, and then right on cue, "And this is Alina," she continued, pulling my sister closer. "She just got promoted." The conversation came alive again, around her, not me, never me. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, I caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror at her red light. For a moment, I barely recognized the person staring back, not because I had changed, but because I had spent so long letting others define who I was. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, a quiet realization settling deep inside me. They could keep their version of me. They could tell the world whatever made them feel comfortable, because one day they were going to learn the truth. Just not from me. If my parents had ever asked, really asked, what my life looked like beyond their version of it, they would have noticed the cracks in their story. Waitresses don't usually disappear during the day. They don't take calls in quiet corners, speaking in firm, measured tones about contracts and timelines. They don't carry two phones, one for work, one for everything else. They don't come home exhausted from something that has nothing to do with serving tables. But no one questioned it, because no one was looking. The truth was, the restaurant was never meant to be permanent. It was survival. After I moved out, I needed something immediate, something that paid quickly and didn't ask too many questions. Waiting tables gave me that. It kept the lights on, paid the rent, and left just enough energy for what I was really building. During the day, I worked on an idea that felt too big for the life I had come from. A logistics company. It started small, almost laughably so. Just me and two partners crammed into a tiny apartment, laptops balanced on our knees, arguing over spreadsheets and delivery routes. We didn't have investors. We didn't have connections. What we had was stubbornness and a refusal to go back to where we started. There were nights I worked a full shift at the restaurant, came home past midnight, and stayed awake until sunrise working on the business. I learned to function on exhaustion, on cheap coffee, and on the quiet belief that if I just kept going, something would eventually give. For a long time, nothing did. We failed more times than we succeeded. Deals fell through, clients backed out. There were months when I seriously considered quitting, when the weight of everything felt too heavy, too uncertain. But quitting meant going back, and I refused to go back. The turning point came unexpectedly. A mid-sized company needed a last-minute logistics solution after their existing provider collapsed. It was messy, complicated, and high risk, the kind of opportunity most established firms would avoid. We said yes, not because we were confident, but because we had nothing to lose. I still remember that week clearly. No sleep, constant calls, problem after problem stacking on top of each other. It felt like everything could fall apart at any second. But it didn't. We delivered, and that one job led to another, and another. Within a year, we weren't struggling anymore, we were growing. Within 3, we had expanded beyond anything we had originally imagined, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being the girl who was just trying to survive. I became someone who was building something real. By the 6th year, the business had stabilized into something powerful. That's when I made the decision. I wanted something permanent, something tangible, something that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. So I started looking at properties, not small ones, not safe ones, big ones, the kind that would have terrified the version of me who once counted tips at the end of every shift just to make rent. When I finally found it, a commercial property valued at $4, $7 million, I didn't hesitate as long as I thought I would. I walked through the building alone the first time. The space echoed with possibility, empty floors, wide windows, sunlight stretching across polished concrete. I could see it, what it was, what it could become, what it meant. The day I signed the papers was quiet. No celebration, no announcement, no one standing beside me. Just a pen in my hand and a steady breath as I wrote my name across the final page. It felt heavier than I expected. Not because of the money, but because of everything it represented. Every ignored achievement, every quiet dismissal, every moment I had been made to feel small, it all led here, to something undeniable, something that no one could reduce to a single word. I kept the deed in a folder on my desk. Simple, unassuming, just a piece of paper. But sometimes, late at night, I would open it and look at my name printed clearly across the top. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's comparison, just me. I thought about telling my parents once. Just once, I imagined sitting across from them, placing the document on the table, watching their expressions shift from confusion to realization. But every version of that conversation ended the same way, not with pride, with control, questions about how I did it, suggestions about what I should do next. subtle ways of inserting themselves into something they had never supported. And I realized something important. They didn't deserve to be part of this, not yet, maybe not ever. So I let them keep their story, let them introduce me as the waitress, let them believe I was still exactly where they had left me. Because the truth wasn't something I needed to prove, it was something they would eventually discover. And when they did, it wouldn't come with explanations or permission or approval, just reality waiting for them, patient, unavoidable. The truth didn't come out the way I imagined. There was no dramatic reveal, no carefully planned moment where I placed the deed on the table and watched everything shift. It happened by accident, quiet, ordinary, and irreversible. Elena showed up unannounced. That wasn't unusual. She had always moved through life with the assumption that doors would open for her, including mine. She knocked once lightly, before letting herself in like she already knew I'd be home. "Wow," she said, stepping inside, her eyes sweeping across the apartment. "You've upgraded?" I closed my laptop slowly, masking the flicker of irritation. "It's been a while," I replied. She shrugged, kicking off her shoes and walking further in. "I've been busy." There it was again, that subtle difference between us. Her busyness was always important. Mine was invisible. She wandered around, picking things up, glancing at details she didn't quite understand. Furniture, the layout, the view, none of it matched the life she thought I had. "You make good tips or something," she teased, half laughing. "Something like that," I said. She didn't notice the tone. Elena had always been curious, but not in a careful way. She didn't think before she touched things, before she asked questions, before she crossed lines that most people would recognize. So when she drifted toward my desk, I didn't react fast enough. "What's all this?" she asked casually, flipping through a stack of documents. "Nothing important," I said, standing up, but she had already found it, the folder, the one thing I never showed anyone. She pulled the paper out slowly, her expression shifting as her eyes moved across the page. At first it was confusion, then focus, and then stillness. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I stopped a few steps away. "It's exactly what it looks like." She didn't laugh this time, didn't make a joke, didn't brush it off. Instead, she read it again, slower, as if the numbers might change. They put the wrong name, she said, almost to herself. "This can't be yours." "It is." Her head snapped up, eyes searching my face for any sign that I was joking. "I wasn't. This says 4.7 million. She whispered, "I know." "You don't have 4.7 million," she said quickly, almost defensively, like correcting reality would make it safer. "I do." The room felt different after that, smaller, heavier. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as her older sister, not as the quiet one in the background, but as something she couldn't immediately define. "You're serious," she said. "Yes, but you're a waitress." There it was, that word, still clinging to me even now. I let out a slow breath. "Is that what you really think?" "It's what Mom and Dad said," she replied, her voice faltering slightly. "It's what you said too. You never corrected them. I never needed to." Her grip tightened on the paper. "Then what is all this? What do you actually do?" I held her gaze. "I built a company." Silence. "You're lying." "I'm not." "You would have told us." "No," I said calmly. I wouldn't have. That hit her harder than anything else. I could see it in the way her expression shifted. Not just confusion now, but something deeper. Something uncomfortable. "Why?" she asked. It wasn't accusatory. It was uncertain. And for the first time, I didn't have to think about the answer. "Because you never saw me," I said simply. Her eyes flickered. "That's not true." "It is." I cut in gently. "You saw what was convenient, what you were told, what fit." She looked down at the deed again, as if it might argue with me. But it didn't. It just sat there, clear, unchangeable. "Does Mom know?" she asked quietly. "No." "Dad?" "No." She swallowed. "They're not going to react well." A small, almost humorless smile crossed my face. "I know. And you're just okay with that." I thought about it for a moment. About all the years of silence, all the times I had been reduced to something smaller than I was, all the moments they chose not to ask, not to see, not to understand. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said. Elena folded the paper carefully, but not the way I did, not with the same awareness of what it meant. She placed it back in the folder, slower this time, more deliberate, as if it had gained weight in her hands. "I need to tell them," she said finally. I didn't stop her, didn't argue, didn't try to control what happened next. Because the truth was never meant to stay hidden forever, and this was the moment it stopped being mine alone. As she walked toward the door, she paused, her hand resting lightly on the handle. "I didn't know," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. I believed her. That was the strange part. "I know," I replied. She hesitated for a second longer, then left. And just like that, everything changed, not loudly, not all at once, but in a way that couldn't be undone. Because somewhere between assumption and reality, between who they thought I was and who I had become, the truth had finally been seen. And it wasn't small anymore. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had already started vibrating. Once, twice, then nonstop. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Still, I let it ring. There was something almost poetic about it, the urgency, the sudden need to reach me, the impatience in every missed call notification stacking across my screen. For years, I had been available. Now, for the first time, I wasn't. When I finally looked, there were 12 missed calls from my mother, 7 from my father, 3 messages from Elena, "Call me, we need to talk, now." I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down without replying. Not out of anger, not even out of spite, but because I wanted this to happen face, no interruptions. No escaping the truth halfway through. If they wanted answers, they were going to hear them fully. Their house looked exactly the same. Perfectly maintained, carefully presented, the kind of place that always felt more like a display than a home. As I stepped inside, the tension was immediate. My mother stood near the center of the living room, her posture stiff, her expression strained. My father sat on the couch, leaning forward, his hands clasped tightly together. Elena was off to the side, quieter than I had ever seen her. No one smiled, no one pretended. "Good, you took your time." My father said, his voice sharp. "I came." I replied calmly. My mother stepped forward. Is it true? There it was, no greeting, no warmth, just the question that mattered to them. Yes, her breath caught slightly. The property, the business, all of it. Yes. The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that presses against your chest. My father stood abruptly. "Why didn't you tell us?" I met his gaze evenly. "You never asked." "That's not an answer," he snapped. "It's the only one that matters." My mother's expression tightened. "We are your parents. We deserve to know." I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not anymore. Just clarity. Did I deserve to be seen? I asked quietly. She blinked, thrown off. "What does that have to do with everything?" I said. I took a step further into the room, my voice steady. "You told people I was a waitress," I continued. "Not because it was true, but because it was convenient. That was true. My father argued. You worked as one. For a while," I said. "But you never cared enough to find out what came after." They didn't respond because they couldn't. Elena shifted slightly, her voice breaking the tension. "They didn't know." I glanced at her briefly. "Neither did you." She lowered her eyes, and for the first time I saw it clearly, not arrogance, not confidence, but realization. "We were protecting you," my mother said, her tone softer now, searching for control in something that was slipping away. "No," I replied gently. "You were protecting your version of me." "That's not fair." She insisted. "It is." I said. "Because the moment I stopped fitting that version, you stopped looking." My father exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "All that money, all that success, and you said nothing." I held his gaze. "Yes, why?" he demanded, and this time I didn't hesitate, "because I knew this is exactly how you would react. The shift was immediate. Confusion turned into calculation. Shock softened into something else, something familiar. "Well," my mother said slowly, her voice changing, "now that we know, we should talk about what this means." "There it was I almost smiled for you," I asked, "for the family." She corrected quickly. My father nodded. "We can help you manage things. Investments, expansion, these are big decisions. I've already made them," I said. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," he pressed. "I'm not," I replied. "I just didn't include you." That landed harder than anything else. The room went still again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was something closer to understanding. "I didn't come here to argue," I said finally. My mother's voice was tight. "Then why did you come?" I looked around the room, the same walls, the same space that had never quite felt like mine. "I came to close this chapter," I said. My father frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I continued, my voice calm but firm, "you can keep telling people I'm a waitress." They stared at me confused, because from now on, I added, picking up my bag, I won't be around to hear it. My mother's face paled. "You don't mean that." "I do. You're just going to walk away," my father said, disbelief creeping into his voice. I met his eyes one last time. "I already did," I said. This time, when I turned toward the door, no one stopped me. No one argued, no one tried to rewrite the moment, because they couldn't. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter, not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer had control over me. For years, they had defined me with a single word, reduced everything I was into something small enough to ignore. Now they were left with something they couldn't reshape. The truth, and as I walked away, I realized something that felt almost like peace. This was never about proving them wrong. It was about no longer needing them to be right.